Welcome to Three Count Commentaries. This is Q&A for January 2022. We got quite a few questions here, so this ought to be fun. I think this is the third Q&A I've done. These are always very enjoyable. So let's get right into it. Let's not waste a lot of time because we're probably going to be here for a while. Question 1 from Mal. Have you ever been to an independent wrestling show? Do you plan on going to GCW Most Notorious? So to the answer to the second question is probably yes. It really is right around the corner from my house. So there really is no excuse other than I don't want to pay $50 to not go. But since I told myself I was going to attend more wrestling events, I probably am going to go to that show. I may have to go by myself because I can't really talk anybody else into going to a GCW show because they're like, who, what, when, where, how, why? Why would I ever do that? I can't even get any of my nerd wrestling friends to go with me. So I'm probably going to end up going by myself, which ought to still be fun because I'm going to find a way to have fun at a wrestling show. Have I ever been to an independent wrestling show before? Absolutely not. I've never been to one before. D-Mac, what is your least favorite IWC talking point or narrative? My least favorite is usually anything that involves metrics that people can easily manipulate, like TV ratings. I'm recording this after Dynamite, so a lot of people are like, the ratings for Dynamite are very good. Some people are saying it's very bad because TBS is in more homes than TNT, and therefore should have more viewers, and yada yada yada. Then we're talking about everything else that was on. I'm just kind of like, I get, looking at the business of the business, everybody should do that to a degree. But I think fixating over TV ratings is like the one thing that is, and then what we also learn is that sometimes it's not even the ratings. Shows get canceled for numerous reasons. After learning so much about TV from reading books and actually following people who actually talk a lot about TV, TV ratings are very important. I mean, they are, but shows get canceled for a myriad of different reasons. Not always because they have bad ratings or low ratings. Sometimes it just doesn't fit what the channel, what the network wants. Sometimes there's just a person who doesn't like it. Sometimes there's business issues or money issues or something like that. And you see this a lot with high-rated television shows, like a Seinfeld or Friends or something like that, where the show has, plenty of ratings, plenty of people watching the show, but the actors might be dickheads. So you might just say, well, look, this guy wants $10 million to come back to do this show. We'd rather just cancel the show than give him $10 million. Ain't got nothing to do with ratings. It's just that this guy's a dickhead and I don't like him, or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of different reasons why shows get canceled. So I don't think why people fixate over ratings. It just doesn't make that much sense to me. His second question, I know that you have been critical of the wrestling media, but are there any people that you feel are credible? When it comes to the wrestling media, when they are doing a story, some of them are better than others. For instance, when it comes to things that involve sensitive issues, usually PW Insider is very good. So when I did like the videos on the developmental programs, and when you're looking up lawsuits and stuff like that, PW Insider is usually pretty good when it comes to that. Fightful is okay when it comes to things that are happening in the moment. Sean Ross Sapp is, he's kind of a puss, but ultimately I don't think he goes out of his way to be malicious. I just think that he sometimes gets shit wrong and sometimes he's biased. He's very sensitive. But when it comes to actual hard-hitting stuff, I think it's Dave Scherer and Mike Johnson are pretty good, and Meltzer is pretty good when it comes to history. So that's what I would do. All right, my next question. Darren Miles, if you was Vince McMahon, how would you have handled the ECW reboot? For starters, I never would have rebooted ECW. I don't think you can catch lightning in a bottle. But let's say the decision is already made and it's going to happen. Well, at that point, you have to realize that all of your brands need to have some form of synergy. And ECW always going to be different because of what the expectations with the 3 letters that come with ECW. With that being said, how I would have handled it is probably I would let Paul do what he wants to do, and then would have edited whatever he was doing that I didn't like. So if he wanted to have some type of silly blood and guts match on television, I was kind of like, yo, that's unnecessary. Probably just would have sent him a memo or something the next morning, like, look, King had these things all the time. I know this is what ECW was known for. I know every yada, yada, yada. I'm messing with the product. But you have different masters now. You're talking about sponsors. You're talking about Sci-Fi Network, which, not really the best place for wrestling, if we're being honest. They're making all sorts of silly demands. They want aliens and shit in there. I mean, I don't know, man. But I would have done that. Basically, I believe that the best way is not to micromanage. I think once Vince put his guys in control of ECW, it was pretty much over. King Smart, do you have any pro wrestling dream matches from any era? If so, what are they? Yes. I wish I could have seen Mr. Perfect versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. That sounded like a match I really wish I would have seen. And something tells me it actually occurred somewhere. Maybe AWA? Maybe? Maybe some WWF house shows or something like that where they might have wrestled a bunch of times. But I don't think I've ever seen them wrestle before. DiBiase and Perfect too. They were always both heels. So they never would have worked against each other. But I think that could have been a pretty cool story between the two of them. As Mr. Perfect and Ted DiBiase. So usually back in the days when guys were heels for a really long time and babyfaces for a really long time, they didn't have matches against each other. So a lot of them would be that, Mr. Perfect and Jake the Snake Roberts. That would have been really fun too. So like those are 3 right off the top of my head. I wish I could have like really took time to build upon. I wish they'd have put more time into Mr. Perfect and Shawn Michaels. They had one match, which was the SummerSlam match, and this thing was a count out, and they never went back to it. Never really, I think they kind of spun off into. Oh, I think Shawn got suspended around this time, right? Yeah, I think Shawn got suspended, but they never went back to that. That's a missed opportunity. I wish we could have gotten. I'm trying to think of some more. Because it's like a ton of Monday Night Wars tier stuff. Like, hey, wish we could have gotten Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hulk Hogan, or Undertaker versus Goldberg in that era, Undertaker and Sting from that era. But I mean, that stuff is pretty obvious. But I think probably one of the missed opportunities is what Diamond Dallas Page talked about, is him and The Rock. I think that's another one where maybe people didn't consider DDP to be on The Rock's level, and The Rock certainly would have buried him if given the chance. But I think that since they were both using the whole People's Champ thing, I actually like that idea. I wish we could have gotten that. I wish we could have gotten DDP as DDP in WWF. I really would wish we could have gotten that. We missed the boat on Kurt Angle and Bret Hart, which I think is my number one. Kurt Angle and Bryan Danielson, we missed the boat on that too. I mean, just imagine if Danielson would have come back, just like a year or two before Kurt Angle retired, and then even in that respect, Angle was kind of broken down and wasn't really the guy that he could have been. If Angle would not have stayed in TNA for, what was he in TNA for like 12 years or something like that? If he hadn't stayed there so long, if he'd have went to TNA, did, from maybe 2006 to 2010, and then came back around 2011 or 2012, we definitely could have gotten Angle and Danielson, and on a big stage, and that really would have been fun. Same thing with Angle and Punk, and I feel like we just missed the boat on that. It's kind of crazy how guys sometimes are in WWE for so long, and they don't have long matches against each other, like the Lashley and Brock thing that we're about to get at the Royal Rumble. How strange is it that they both have been in the company against each, around that same amount of time? We never seen it. We also didn't get to see Lesnar and Batista. I've been screaming for that for like 10 years. Like, I would thought that would have been the automatic go-to when Batista was coming back. I know Batista got to handpick his own opponents and all that kind of shit. But I would have said, instead of Batista and Randy Orton, it should have been Batista and Brock. the beast versus the animal. You know, it writes itself. Why we never got that is beyond me. You know, but, you know, I guess when you have egos and it's a question of who's going to go over, it's that kind of thing. That's that kind of shit. You also got Brock and Shawn. Now, we could have had Brock and Shawn. They were in the company at the same time. But when Brock came back, Shawn had already retired. But they could have done that in, 2004? 2003, maybe? But we never got around to it. Of course, we were supposed to get Shawn versus Eddie Guerrero. That never occurred either. I really wish we could have gotten that too. His second question: how would you have booked Biggie versus Bobby Lashley for the WWE Championship? What I would have done, maybe even had Biggie win the Rumble, you know, and have that collision there. I certainly wouldn't have done it the way that they did it, which is the hot shotting. That shit was awful. Besides Drew McIntyre, this is his third question: who do you see as a potential challenger to dethrone the Tribal Chief? The problem with Roman is that all of his opponents are escalating in threat level. So you start out with Jey Uso, who is kind of a threat, but a lower level threat. Then you have Kevin Owens, slightly more dangerous than that. Then you who do they have after that? You know, what was it, Cesaro? Cesaro. Then it was, you know, Edge and Danielson. That was good, you know. So then once we got to Cena, it was like, okay, everything else is a step back. Once he did Cena, everything else is now Lesnar is a step up in threat level, step down in star power. So, because Cena is a bigger star than Lesnar. So and plus they've had 100 matches, you know, Lesnar and Reigns. But it works because Brock is always a physical threat. The issue is once he gets past Lesnar, there is no one else. You know, you would have to bring somebody off the bench. So in order to for it to make sense for Roman to lose, you would have to build somebody up. And it would have to be somebody that people actually like, and people actually care about, that Roman can believably lose to. So you're talking about anybody who's under 6 feet tall, you can forget it. Or, you know, under 230 pounds, you can forget it. Because Roman has been proven that he's physically going to just destroy this guy. Like he did to Finn Balor. Like he did. You know, you could put Kofi in that spot. Nobody believes Kofi's going to win, though. You know, and it's something to be said about having the underdog story and the underdog wins. And this ain't the time for an underdog story. This is a slaying of the beast. This is a conquering hero story. And that leaves you with one option, which is Drew McIntyre. That's the only option you got. He's the only guy who fits as far as being big, strong, believable, that if he has a fair match with Roman, he can win, and people believe that he can win. The only issue is I'm not sure people like Drew enough. He doesn't get enough sympathy, you know, nor is he heroic enough. They have brutally damaged the Drew McIntyre character over 2020. They destroyed that character. He needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, and they don't have enough time to do it. They got 4 months, you know, 3 or 4 months to rebuild Drew McIntyre's entire character. He's the only one I could think of that you can have Reigns lose to that's believable. That's on the regular roster. You know, that's it. Even if you bring in The Rock, Roman has to beat The Rock, because The Rock can't jump off his couch and come in and beat Roman. That'll shit on everybody. You know, you can't do that. You can't call Undertaker, so that's not going to happen. So you really have no choice but Drew McIntyre. And if you go with somebody, and let's say you were one of these people who are like, Braun Breaker, it's like, he's 24. You can't put that amount of responsibility and pressure on him. It's just too early for that. You know, if he had been in the business for 2 or 3 years already, maybe. But that's still a stiff maybe. I think your safest bet, and the crazy thing and what really kind of takes Drew McIntyre out of it for me, is that him and Roman are around the same age. So it's not like you're putting the Roman candle out and then you're lighting a younger one. him and Roman are like neck and neck as far as being the same age. So it's pretty much a lateral move. You know, it's a downgrade in star power, but it's a lateral move in terms of age. So then you'll be talking about who's going to take the belt from Drew, because Drew is 36. You know, so we're in a weird position. Damian Priest would have been a good choice, but he's older than Roman. So and they destroyed his character too. So I think your only believable option right now that I see is Drew McIntyre. Even with AJ Styles, who probably could have been a contender. And I still think he's a great contender. AJ's older. He's slower than he used to be. He's not there. Randy Orton, we've done that 100 times already. I wouldn't even do it for Randy. You know, and I love Randy, but I wouldn't do that. It's just, it's not believable. You know, it's as strong as Roman has been. It's not really believable that a regular roster guy is going to beat him, but it has to be a regular roster guy that beats him. Dop, do you think the MJF and Wardlow feud has been a bit of start and stop? Yes. And I think they've been trying to do what they call long-term storytelling, which is going back to things every once in a while. They touch in base. They do something and they'll touch base and go back to it. I'm not against it, but I'm not for it either, because it does ultimately something that is not continually pushed into people's minds, people forget. Like when you watch, like you could have a bigger overarching story, which is the Wardlow MJF feud is a big overarching story. But you have to maintain that, has to be maintained at certain points. When you have MJF doing 100 different things, and then you magically just throw that in there, it does come across as being something that, we haven't forgotten, rather than this is important. Second question. I have been rewatching some old WWE pay-per-views on the network. Do you know why Edge and Christian won all the TLC matches? I don't know. I didn't know that they did win all the TLC matches. But it seems to me like it probably would have been more a thing where the Dudleys likely didn't need it. And Edge and the Hardy Boys keep their sympathy if they keep losing. So, and that's part of what makes the Hardy Boys such a big deal is when you look at those three teams, the Dudleys were the truest tag team of the bunch, even among the Hardy Boys. But Edge and Christian were more of the WWE guys. You know, Edge was a project for them for a long time. Probably the reason why he won all those matches. Vince has always kind of been an Edge guy. So it might have been that reason right there, and the politics of, Vince liking Edge. But it could also be that the Hardy Boys need to have a certain amount of sympathy in order to stay over. If they constantly win, then they lose their underdog status. And then that damages them in the long term as people will stop, feeling so much sympathy for them. They're young boys. They're jumping off shit. They're being dangerous. That's what you want. The Dudleys are badasses. They're tough guys. Anytime you can overcome the badasses, the tough guys, that's a win for you. Edge and Christian were kind of in the middle. They were small like the Dudleys, not small like the Hardys, but bigger than they were. They weren't the badasses that the Dudley Boys were either. So it was kind of like those wins mostly solidified Edge and Christian in this scenario, because they seemed to probably needed it the most at the time. As far as guys who were, I'm not sure if at that time, I'm not sure if Edge and Christian were as over as the Dudley Boys or the Hardys. So maybe that's really what another thing that they were trying to do is make sure that we saw Edge and Christian as being the equals, or even in some cases the superiors to the Dudley Boys and the Hardys. The third question from Dop. Do you see any similarities between Daredevil and Batman? Yes, basically these similarities were created by Frank Miller. Frank Miller came in, and when he started writing Daredevil, he basically just made him blonde Batman. And I was like, okay, this works. But Daredevil was created to be basically another Spider-Man. I think this is what Stan Lee, when he came up with the Daredevil concept, is he basically just likes doing Spider-Man. And this is when if you go back to the really early Daredevil, and you see it in some of the later stuff too, he swings around the town with his cane, kind of like how Spider-Man swings around on the web. And then when, what's that shithead's name? Comic book writer Mark Waid, when he reinvigorated, aka destroyed Daredevil, that's pretty much what Daredevil became again. He became basically Spider-Man. He was a swashbuckling, it was kind of like, ugh, it was terrible. But the brooding, dark Daredevil, yeah, that's basically Frank Miller. Almost everything that Frank Miller crafted for Batman, he just basically, did the same thing for Daredevil. He just built a world around him that was dark and ugly. And, Daredevil was like the guy struggling to maintain the light in this world of complete and total corrupt people. And it ended up working because it redefined Daredevil, and it's still how Daredevil is today. With the exception of Mark Waid's shitty run, where he turned Daredevil into a guy who kisses some guy's wife and all that kind of shit. It was just really weird and stupid. Mark Waid Daredevil was awful, man. Oh, that was awful. That was some awful shit. I bought one of the trades of that Mark Waid Daredevil, and I was like, I'm not reading this shit again. I think I gave it away. It was that bad. It's unreadable. But some people don't like Frank Miller Batman. They don't think it's proper Batman, but they really don't like how Frank Miller writes, Superman and some of the Wonder Woman, some of those characters. But I think he did wonders with Daredevil. He was allowed to basically do whatever he wanted. So he was able to create Elektra. He was able to, do more with the Kingpin. Now the Kingpin is a Spider-Man villain, but now he's more associated with Daredevil, because of Frank Miller. I just wish Frank Miller would have had the Punisher at the time. I don't think the Punisher had even been created yet when Frank Miller did Daredevil. I don't think the Punisher existed yet. But I could just only imagine how badass Frank Miller's Punisher would have been. Jesus Christ. I heard that he had a pitch for Captain America that ended up being another book that he read called Holy Terror. Then it was going to be Captain America beating up like jihadis and stuff like that. And they were like, absolutely, we're not doing that. I'm like, that's the perfect Captain America story, to build around 9/11. Marvel didn't have the balls to do that. But yeah, there's some similarities between Daredevil and Batman. And it's because of Frank Miller. Mr. VXG, what is your favorite culturally insensitive wrestling gimmick? Mine was Hakeem the African Dream, aka the One Man Gang. Oh God. Kamala is very good. I like Kamala because Kamala wasn't goofy. He was serious. He really played it up like he was an African savage. And if you go back and watch some of his stuff in the 80s, he really played it up like he was an African savage. And it was, stupid or slow or didn't really understand the rules of wrestling or proper decorum, like wearing shoes and stuff like that. Umaga is another one. I love Umaga. Akeem the African Dream, though, is fucking hilarious. That's fucking great. And then I found out later that it's a rib on Dusty Rhodes. That made it even funnier. I was like, holy shit. Because then I started to see it, Then I started to see it. And I was like, oh, okay. Because you see those old Dusty Rhodes promos, especially from the 70s, where he was kind of, let's just say, lifting from black culture. He was. I mean, it is what it is. Dusty is the Elvis of pro wrestling when it comes to lifting stuff from black people. But it was cool because I think, he was working in the South. He's a Southern boy. A lot of black culture is Southern, So the certain way that you use certain words, the way that you talk, a lot of that stuff is Southern. And so it could just be, hey, everybody's from the South, and this is how black people talk from the South. This is how white people talk from the South. This is how a certain class of people talk. And it's not him lifting from black people, but 90% of that shit is obviously lifted from black people. Same thing with Elvis. It's like, sure, it's entirely possible Elvis came up with some of this stuff on his own. It's also entirely possible he stole some shit from some blues players. And, there's always going to be a certain percentage of it that's going to be swiped from some other people. But it's over for me. I don't really care. But yeah, Kamala is one of my favorite ones. A lot of the Iron Sheik, his gimmick is, it ain't number one, Hawk two. You can't. I cannot watch an Iron Sheik match, but watching him cut promos or just stand still and do stuff is very fun. It's very fun. It's very funny. The We the People, Jack Swagger gimmick. I thought that was pretty fun. I hated when they added Cesaro to the mix. It was stupid. Just could have just went on with it. So what if people think he's a racist? So what? I don't care if people think that he's a racist. He's good. Joe Gacy is another one. I love him. There was, when I say Jack Swagger, there was another one that was in my head. That was in that same vein. JBL, when JBL was chasing the Mexicans across the border and that kind of shit. That shit got me back into wrestling. I don't know if I told that story before, but I wasn't even watching wrestling when JBL won the title. I thought it was stupid. And then I heard that he had this really hilarious segment on SmackDown, and I happened to watch it with my brothers, and I saw him in the dark attacking Mexicans with his hat or some shit like that, forcing Mexicans to go back across the border. And I thought it was the most hilarious and insensitive shit in the world, man. I was like, I love this. That and Vince Wrestling God. That's amazing too. Oh God. Vince and Shane versus Shawn Michaels and God. Oh my God. Oh, that's tremendous. That was some tremendous shit. I love me some culturally insensitive wrestling, dog. I really do. All right. Park and Hunt. Number 1. What is your favorite and least favorite supervillain? Oh, my least favorite is Arcade. I absolutely hate Arcade. I will not read anything or watch anything that features Arcade. I absolutely hate him. It's stupid, right? I think he puts people in games. It's like deadly games. But the fact is they overused him. Like when the whole, I hate to put the SJW, when they started doing that shit, and Arcade was the villain in like every other book, it was awful, bro. It was horse shit. I will not read Arcade. I won't. I can't even think of a good Arcade story. Low key, one of my favorite villains is Mysterio. They did a great story with Mysterio and Old Man Logan, where Mysterio is the reason Logan murders all of the X-Men. And I was like, whoa, because you really realize Mysterio has some really fucking cool powers that he causes people to have, psychotic breaks. Like he did the same thing with Daredevil. He's going to trick Daredevil into killing that baby, like he had pretty much gassed Daredevil into, a psychotic rage, and he thought this baby was the Antichrist, and he was going to throw this baby off of his roof. And it was basically Kraven's Last Hunt, but for Mysterio. So you had this story where Mysterio is, trying to destroy Daredevil's life, and he's going to start by trying to trick Daredevil into killing this baby. And then he also tricks, I think it was, oh shit. He tricks Karen Page into thinking that she had AIDS and all this kind of stuff. It was all just crazy stuff. And you see like Mysterio is very underutilized. But I remember all the big Mysterio angles. Like if you just see Mysterio in like a Spider-Man book, he comes across as a crappy, stupid illusionist. But then you see somebody who can take what Mysterio does and take it to the next level. And you're like, holy shit. Mysterio can cause Wolverine to go crazy and he murdered the entire X-Men team. He can do that. He does have that ability. It's probably Doctor Doom. I'm a huge fan of Doctor Doom. Mainly because Doctor Doom, before they started going too far with it, like there was a certain element of Doctor Doom that was just plain evil, then there was Doctor Doom who was noble but evil. There was a story of Stan Lee saying that Doctor Doom isn't really evil because he truly believes that he can save the world and that the way he can run the world would be better for everyone. That's his true and personal belief. And then that was actually used in a Black Panther story where the Panther God scans Doctor Doom to see, it's called Doom War, if you've never read it. Basically, Latveria invades Wakanda. Dr. Doom invades Wakanda and is going to use all of the vibranium and everything to empower himself and give himself super magic powers and all that kind of shit. And he gets tested by the Panther God. And Dr. Doom goes to the Panther God and says, like, I truly believe that if I run the world will be a better place. And the Panther God is like, if you lie to me or if I sense deception within you, I'm going to kill you. And Dr. Doom passed the test because he truly believes. It's not malicious. He sees heroes as people who are just getting in the way of what's good for everyone, you know? Now, they did go too far with Dr. Doom, though. Like, they started making him a minority. His mom's soul is in hell. It gave him too much sympathy. It was too much sympathy. And, like, his mom's soul being trapped in hell and all that shit. I was like, come on. You know, then he became a gypsy. I think it was, he became a gypsy. This was around the time they made Scarlet Witch a gypsy too. And all of a sudden there was gypsies doing magic everywhere all of a sudden. But when they made him a minority, then he became a revolutionary and he became the guy who was going to overthrow the evil dictator in his own country to become an evil dictator. I was like, get the hell out of here. It's too much sympathy. It's okay for you to have some sympathy, you know, but once you're talking about this guy is on a mystical quest to save his mom's soul from Dormammu or some shit, I'm like, what wasn't Dormammu? It was the other guy, the devil, Mephisto. Okay, so it was like, he's gonna save his mom's soul from Mephisto. I'm like, no, he's a villain. No, don't do that. And I forget which story. I think it might have been Bendis who built an entire book when with Dr. Doom as Iron Man. I was like, it sounded cool. I thought he was going to be a villain though, and he started out kind of as a villain. Then he became a hero at the end, and then they had to try to find some way of making him a villain again. I was like, this is stupid. Then they talk about him getting married. I was like, they ruined this shit. But I'm not a big fan of the Fantastic Four. I just like Dr. Doom though. I don't really like the Fantastic Four. Dr. Doom stories with Brother Voodoo, where I got the first issue of Brother Voodoo. I think it was written by Rick Remender. And this is when Brother Voodoo becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. And Dr. Doom is like, wait a minute. What are you doing as Sorcerer Supreme? I should be the Sorcerer Supreme. And then hunted him down and whooped his motherfucking ass to take the Eye of Agamotto from him. I thought that was dope, you know, because it's like, yeah, it makes sense that Dr. Doom would come out of nowhere and be like, wait a minute. Who is this guy calling himself the Sorcerer Supreme? I'm the Sorcerer Supreme. You know, I forgot what happened to Doctor Strange at that time. I don't remember. But that was fun. When he went back in time with Iron Man, Dr. Doom, that was fun too. The King Arthur stuff. This is when they was, him and Iron Man had to work together, but Dr. Doom was trying to find a way to get more power, and Iron Man's legitimately fascinated. He hates magic. So here comes Dr. Doom with the magic bullshit. And then they get launched back in time. That was really fun too. So I really like Dr. Doom, even though I don't like the Fantastic Four. Park and Hunt's second question. What do you think was the apex of each major wrestling company? Well, the WWF is easily the 90s. That's when they were at their most culturally relevant. After that, it would probably be the 80s for WWF. For WCW, I truly believe that 96 to 98 was the biggest years of WCW. And that's for obvious reasons. They had the NWO, they had Goldberg, they had Sting, they had Hogan. It was excellent. I think before that, WCW didn't have much going for it, and they certainly didn't have shit going for it afterwards. For TNA, it's hard because for TNA, the early years were what made the later years possible. But when they started getting some names, things became a little bit better for them. I don't think the creative got much better. Because that whole hodgepodge of Immortal and Aces and Eights, like that whole block of time right there, I forget, they might have been like 3 or 4 years right there. I was just kind of like, I was tuned out with TNA, to be quite honest. I was watching it, but I wasn't paying attention. That's kind of how it was. So I think Immortal might be the highest point. That's when they turned Jeff Hardy heel, and that's when I stopped being interested. Because I was like, Jeff Hardy as a heel, I don't buy it. I don't buy Jeff Hardy being mean. I can buy Jeff Hardy being weird. I can buy Jeff Hardy being aloof, but I can't buy Jeff Hardy being mean. I just don't buy it. And then Hogan and Bischoff trying to get him to do it was stupid. But I think that if you look creatively at the height of TNA, it'll probably be right around the time Kurt Angle came in, because they went on that long stretch of matches between Angle and Joe. That stuff was really good. They still had the Jeff Jarrett shit going on and all that kind of stuff, but so it was never really as good as it could be. But I think 2010 might have been the cutoff as far as TNA being really good. So probably from 07 to 10. I know Immortal and all that shit happened a lot later, but I think that's when it was at a higher level, when more people were watching it. But I think creatively it was better in 07 to 10. For Ring of Honor, because I didn't follow it that closely, I can't really tell you, and it's very difficult. It's really difficult to say for Ring of Honor, because they were running bigger venues right before they closed than they did early in their time. For ECW, it was easily 96 to 99. ECW finally started getting attention with WWF, and they started getting on pay-per-view, and they started getting a lot of more of attention. But the problem was, once they started getting attention, keeping it became a problem. And then once people saw what the hell they were doing, that became a problem. So for ECW, that was their biggest issue, is that they'd have stayed underground and stayed quiet and not wanted to be mainstream and not wanted to be, one of the big boys like WCW and WWF, they could have still been in business. But because they wanted to get out and get sponsors and all that shit and be on national TV, it ended up killing the brand, because everybody was like, wait, what the hell are you guys doing? You guys are bleeding all over each other and stapling each other's forearms to each other's foreheads. People are assholes. All right, Park and Hunt has a third question. What do you think was the most disgusting tactic or storyline in wrestling? Oh, I don't. See, the thing is, man, a lot of stuff is tasteless. There's some real tasteless shit out there, man. A lot of it is stuff that Vince came up with. Of course, it'd be easy for me to say Katie Vick, because Katie Vick is very bad. Katie Vick is very bad. The idea that Kane would have sex with a dead woman, that shit is gross, right? It really doesn't serve any narrative purpose either. Like, what do we do with that information? Like, you write that into a character's backstory. What are you supposed to do with that? We're supposed to think Kane is just some freak, right? It's like, who punishes him for raping a corpse? There's no way for us to pay off that angle. So what was the point of it? There really is no point to that. So that was very bad, and it makes no narrative sense. At least sometimes when they do tasteless shit, it makes narrative sense, like the Billy and Chuck wedding. That was tasteless. It was very bad, but narratively it made sense, because people thought Billy and Chuck were gay. And, it makes sense that people who think that these two guys are gay, and then you find out in the end that they're not gay, is because nobody ever said that they were gay, So it was like, they just kind of went along with it. But it was tasteless. They didn't need to do that either. Using dead people, the Eddie Guerrero in Hell, I didn't like that. I wouldn't say it was the most disgusting thing that anybody's ever done. But I think probably the most disgusting tactic, the thing that I didn't like the most, Melanie Pillman on TV, right after Brian died. Oh my God, I hate that so much. I hate that so much. That's probably the single most disgusting thing Vince McMahon has ever done. I'm talking like as far as on-screen stuff. That was horrible. That was very bad. That was very, very bad. Now, if it had been like 2 months later or 3 months later or something like that, and she was invited to come and talk about what happened to Brian and give a cautionary tale or something like that, that was one thing. But for her to be on TV the very next day, being interviewed by Vince over whether he did steroids and just please say it wasn't steroids. Like that kind of shit, nah, that sucked. That's worse than anything you can do within storyline. Because within storyline, you could always just attribute it to the characters being dickheads, the characters being assholes or whatever. But this was real life shit. The man was really dead. That's the man's real wife. And this is a real interview where she's sitting here crying. As they don't know what happened to Brian Pillman yet. He's only been dead 12 hours or some shit. And we're already doing interviews trying to cover up shit. Like, come on, dude. That was disgusting. That was fucking whack. All right, the fourth question. What do you think is the best and worst wrestling channel? I don't know about the worst. But I like Marky D123. I really like that channel because he does a lot of TNA history. And it reminds me a lot of the stuff that I saw that I don't remember. So I love Marky D123. I always watch that channel. And it's funny. You know, he's legit funny. So I like when wrestling channels have something new. They take a different angle on things. It's sure we can all do videos of how bad the invasion angle was. Oh, the invasion angle, wasn't it so bad? I'm like, yeah, everybody knows it was bad. People were talking about how bad it was when it happened. I wasn't even watching this shit. And I knew it wasn't going right. But I like Marky D123 because he does different things, you know, and his focus on TNA is really what makes his channel unique for me. So I don't know about the worst. I don't really follow that many channels. I think that the Cultaholics and all of those guys are probably some of the worst though. They're shitty, you know, the stupid fucking lists. And but they used to do cool content. I forget what is it, Cultaholic? They used to do like the what happened to this wrestler, or they do the career retrospectives. I thought those things were fun. But some of the other stuff they do, absolute garbage. But I think Marky D123 is one of my favorite channels. And of course my boy Millennial Smart is very good too. But I don't really have time to watch a lot of other channels. But if you know somebody wants to suggest something, you're welcome to do so. Fifth question. What is your least favorite video you have made so far? Probably my least favorite video that I made would probably be one of my earlier videos where the audio was really bad. I know the audio still isn't great, but the audio was like really bad for like the first maybe couple of months. The audio was awful, and that was that kind of ran people off. But you know, my favorite videos have always been anything that requires me to think off the cuff. And I like doing the Smart Tears videos. Those are my favorite. I love doing Smart Tears videos because I get a kick out of those shits. So I really don't have one favorite video. I have a favorite video style though, because I do like doing the Smart Tears videos. Those are fun. I like things that make me think. So that's good. Least favorite is probably when I was probably reading some long, dry, boring article. I'm not a fan of that. Darren Miles is back. Oh shit, I just mentioned the invasion and here it is. How would you book the invasion angle and the retirement of Stone Cold Steve Austin? Well, I don't think... Did they tell anybody that was Steve Austin's last match? I don't think they did. I think his retirement angle, though, when he lost that Survivor Series and had to go away, when his team lost that Survivor Series and had to go away, I thought that was a nice send-off. You know, it was a nice little nail in the coffin because Austin as a wrestler was already done. And now we were writing off Steve Austin as a personality that we now know that he's not even going to be around a lot anymore. You know, so I like that. And I think that his match at WrestleMania 19, outside of telling everybody that it was going to be his last match, I think people kind of knew it was going to be his last match. But I like that. I wouldn't mess with his retirement. The invasion angle, though, I definitely would have done better with that. The issue is always going to be, are you going to have perfect circumstances? And perfect circumstances is, do you have access to all the players? And when it comes to WCW, because of the way the contracts had, they did not have access to all the players. So they weren't going to get Scott Steiner. They weren't going to get Goldberg. They weren't going to get Sting. They did have Hogan. You know, they had Nash and Hall, but those guys came in later. And they were trying to do the invasion angle in 2000 or 2001 rather. And it just didn't work out. Personally, I think ECW didn't need to be a part of this. Just dissolve ECW and absorb those guys into the WWF roster. And you make it strictly WWF versus WCW. And then you put people on their appropriate sides. This idea of Steve Austin even being involved with WCW, especially after you fired him, well, not after you fired him, but WCW fired him, makes no sense. What loyalty does he have to them? But the number one thing that you needed in order for the invasion angle to work was Eric Bischoff. More than Hogan, more than Goldberg, more than Sting. The number one thing you needed to make the invasion angle work was Eric Bischoff. And they didn't get Eric Bischoff until late 2002, mid 2002 or something like that. So he came after the invasion angle was already over. Just like Goldberg didn't come to after the invasion angle already over. Just imagine what you could have done if you had Eric Bischoff in 2000 or 2001. If you'd have brought him in 2001. And Eric Bischoff was instead the voice of the Alliance. Even if you wanted to do the Alliance. All right, let's say you just had to do the Alliance. You still would have had Bischoff and you would have had Heyman working together to destroy the WWF. That would have been fun. Right? You needed Eric Bischoff. That way it feels real. It feels legitimate. It's not the McMahons doing McMahon shit. Everybody knows Stephanie and Shane don't really want to destroy the WWF. It's fed them their whole lives. Nobody believes that shit. But it's more believable if it's Eric Bischoff and then you own the footage. So you can show Eric Bischoff with the crown, sitting in the ring, talking about how he's going to put Vince McMahon out of business and all this kind of stuff. And now he's back to really do it. And he's got access to Ric Flair. And he's got access to Booker T, who was his last world champion. So you got Eric Bischoff, you got Booker T. That's good. You add Ric Flair, that's another one. You don't need Hogan and Goldberg and Sting and all those guys yet. You can bring them in over time. That way you can let their contracts lapse. You start out with a small number of guys, maybe some undercard guys, and maybe one or two of the main dudes. Maybe somebody like a DDP. And, you have those guys there. You start with those guys as being your invasion guys, but you don't really go straight to the top yet. You kind of go after the McMahons. And then you have McMahon, he's going to have his small group of guys, not the main event guys, not Rock, not Austin, not those guys yet. Those guys don't start coming in until Sting, Goldberg, and all them start coming in. And then you just kind of have yourself a nice little B feud right here, where Bischoff is going off on McMahon, McMahon's going off on Bischoff. It's going to feel big because those personalities are involved, but it's not going to be as big as whatever Austin's doing, whatever Triple H is doing, whatever Undertaker is doing, And then, of course, you don't have the big enough players on the WCW side. When you get to Survivor Series, that's when you start spending the money to bring in WCW guys. That's when Eric Bischoff starts talking about bringing in secret weapons. And then maybe that's when you introduce the NWO. And you introduce the NWO as a 5-member team. Straight up, Hall, Nash, Hogan, X-Pac, and somebody else. Maybe Steiner, right? And that's going to be Bischoff's team. Now Vince has to put together a team, and this is when you start putting together Austin, Rock, Undertaker, etc. into a team. And, from there, you have whoever wins. I would give the win to WCW's team just to get them the momentum. Then you start talking about Bischoff is now starting to take over a little bit. He's starting to encroach. Now, maybe you make it a wager. WCW gets some time on Raw or whatever. So now you get the ring skirts changed. Kind of the idea that they had from the beginning, right? You get the ring skirts changed at a certain point. We get a Nitro match, with Tony Schiavone replacing Jim Ross and this whole ordeal. And you build it up, and then we reintroduce some of the bigger stars from WCW. Around WrestleMania, that's when you start having, we're going to have a rematch between WWF and WCW. a different batch of WWF guys, different batch of WCW guys. And then by that point, you probably should have some of the higher level WCW guys in there now. You should have had at least conversations with Bill Goldberg by now. You should have had Hogan out there by now. Still could have had Rock and Hogan. Turn it into a series. Rock and Hogan. Austin Page or something like that. And then, WWF wins in the end or something. But I definitely would have taken my time and understood those contracts were a motherfucker. And they just were, and that's really what's always going to be the problem is can you get around those contracts, which they really couldn't. All right, Mr. VXG is back with another question. What is your opinion on those Detroit Urban Survival training videos? Is Dale Brown legit? Absolutely not. He's going to get your fucking head blown off. You know what? Anybody who tells you that you're going to do some magic kung fu shit that involves people putting guns to your neck, I wouldn't trust it. Because there's just absolutely no way. There's no way it works. So anybody who's trying to turn you into fucking Jet Li, there's a fucking moron. All right, Homelander, HL2. What is your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling? Oh, Jesus. Okay. So we're looking at people who are probably the most influential when it comes to pro wrestling. One, Vince McMahon. You got to have Vince Kennedy McMahon on there. He's got to be there. Number two, probably got to have Ed Strangler Lewis. He's got to be on there. He was one of the originators of work-in matches. So, it wouldn't even be what it is today if it wasn't for Ed Strangler, the Gold Dust Trio. It would be easy to put all three of them on there. But Ed Strangler Lewis, because he was the actual wrestler of the bunch, who was, when it comes to working, as far as agreeing to lose matches for money, agreeing to put over people, for money, building an angle. Hey, if I let you win this time, then you let me win, we make more money on the rematch or something like that, which has always been a big deal in fighting. There's always been a guy willing to take a dive in order to build the rematch later or something like that. But Ed Strangler Lewis really made a big deal about it. So he has to be on there. Gorgeous George has to be on there too. No more. I don't think there's a more influential wrestler than Gorgeous George. First real wrestler to bleach his hair. Every Nature Boy, including Ric Flair and Buddy Rogers, ripped off Gorgeous George. The character, everything is, just as far as wrestlers, he might be one of the most important wrestlers in the business after like Ed Strangler Lewis and Lou Thesz and Jim Londos and some guys like that. And the fourth spot, I don't know. It would be difficult for me to put a promoter. Like I got a promoter already. I got a wrestler already. And I got a influence when it comes to the way that the business operates. So that's three. The fourth, I don't know. I don't know who the fourth would be. It would be easy for me to say Vince Sr. for, helping to, he helped to get rid of the NWA. He aided in that crime. But it would be also, you could put Sam Mushnick, who was the president of the NWA, especially when was under investigation all those years. He would be a nice little addition to there. You could easily put Jim Londos, who was, some people refer to him as the first babyface in wrestling. It's entirely possible, So there's some really big players that you're kind of leaving out that are very important. So it's very hard to do. DeAndre Dukes. Number one, who is the all-time underrated wrestler from any decade? Oh, underrated wrestlers from any decade. Underrated. I think maybe Kevin Von Erich is definitely one of the most underrated. People talk a lot about Kerry because Kerry had the body. He was just a magnificent physical specimen, and he had incredible charisma. David was probably the best worker and probably the better promo, but Kevin was very good. I love watching Kevin Von Erich work. I like almost all the matches I've seen him in. You watch his matches with Ric Flair; they were very good. His matches with the Freebirds, he get in there with somebody who even can't work, like a buddy Michael Hayes, rather not Buddy Roberts, Michael Hayes. They're good. I think he's very underrated because of his brothers. His brothers were so good. People kind of forgot that how good Kevin was. There's nothing you can do about that. Who is the all-time overrated wrestler from any decade? Wow. Can I say Kenny Omega? Or can I say Kazuchika Okada? But it probably wouldn't be Okada. It would more likely be Kenny Omega. Look, in my opinion, I'm of the opinion that a lot of the Omega Okada matches were great because of Okada. That's just me. When Omega wrestled other people, he might have had good matches, but he ain't had matches on the level that he had with Okada. Well, Okada can have great matches with just about anybody. So it wouldn't be Okada, wouldn't be overrated. It would probably be Kenny Omega. But I don't know if he's the most overrated wrestler of all time, though. I don't think that's the case. I think he's overrated mostly among the people on the internet today. That overthink everything that he does, and lead you to believe that he's like the greatest, in-ring performer of all time and all that shit. It's like, calm down with that. Him being in the Hall of Fame already kind of makes him overrated as far as I'm concerned. But I really wouldn't go that far, as far as calling him the most overrated wrestler of any decade. He's on the list though. If it was a top 5, he would be there, probably at 5 or 4. Number 1, I really can't think of one off the top of my head. I know there has to be somebody more overrated than Kenny Omega. There's got to be. I'm just my mind's just blanking on who it could possibly be. But Kenny Omega's on that list. He's good. He ain't that good. He ain't that good. There's probably some guys that everybody loves, but at the same time, I don't think anybody got the hype of Omega. Even when you think about people who are considered like AJ Styles. AJ Styles was considered, the best wrestler in the world. Even then, the hype wasn't the same as it was for Kenny Omega. The hype when Samoa Joe and CM Punk were tearing it up in Ring of Honor, and Bryan Danielson, I was hearing about those guys, and people were trying to get me to watch matches and stuff. Even then, the hype wasn't what it was for Kenny Omega. When I was told that Jay Briscoe was the best wrestler in the world because he was having these kick-ass matches as Ring of Honor World Champion, even then, the hype was not nearly the same as it was for Kenny Omega. People were telling me that I need to watch Omega versus Okada. It was like, some movie buff telling you need to watch It's a Wonderful Life or Casablanca or something like that. You think you're about to be in for some transformational shit. And you just kind of like, it's a fucking wrestling match. And it went too long. Like, like it was, that's what makes it so bad. And that's the only reason I would put Kenny Omega on the list. Otherwise, I would have to say it's got to be somebody else. But I can't think of him. I really can't think of him. But Kenny Omega right now is probably the most overrated wrestler in the history of the planet Earth. Because I've heard about the Dynamite Kid and how great he was. And you can watch the Dynamite Kid and you can see how great he was. He was really good. During that era of the Stampede Wrestling, he was really good. Was he having, transformational, life-changing matches? No. Was he having highly influential matches? Like, yeah, you can obviously see that. You can see guys like Benoit and guys like Eddie Guerrero aping all kinds of shit from the Dynamite Kid. So maybe in 20 years, we'll see a bunch of people aping stuff from Kenny Omega. We do still see people doing some stuff from him now. But I don't see a lot of people patterning themselves after Kenny Omega like they did in Dynamite Kid, or they did after Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair and Macho Man Randy Savage, And I think that most of the Kenny Omega hype comes from wrestling media, And that's just my opinion. DeAndre Duke's third question. What is the biggest dream you wish would have happened but didn't? I'm guessing you mean dream match. If we're talking about dream match, Taker, Sting. I think that match not occurring and we not getting that match is sad. Also, we could have had Sting and Shawn Michaels. We could have had them. I know they were friends already, and they had did some Christian TV show or whatever together. That should have been the beginning right there of getting Sting in WWF, or WWE rather. We didn't get it though. That sucked, you know. So I think Undertaker and Sting is probably the biggest missed opportunity that we could have gotten. Next to Hogan and Austin, and no egos, we're not going to let that one even occur. Fourth question: if ECW had a good financial backer, would they have lasted longer before closing down in 2001? Yes. If they had a decent financial backer, if they would have somebody to control the money, period, and just said, Paul, put Paul on a budget, keep Paul within the budget, things would have been so much better. They probably still would have been around until 2005, 2006. I can see it. Paul he wouldn't have gotten back on TV, but they would have been able to at least adapt to some degree. Now, they may have gotten back on TV a little bit later. I think at that point in time, it was done because the only channel that would take them, Paul had ruined it due to him being unprofessional and dissing them on their own network and that kind of shit. So people forgot about that. It wasn't just the finances. The finances are why they went out of business. But why they couldn't get any fucking help is because of Paul. He's a dickhead, you know? So if Ty Gordon was still there, let's say, and he was still holding the purse strings, there might be some decisions that Paul would not have made and Ty would not have let him make that probably would have prolonged ECW's. But then you still have to deal with Paul, you know, because Paul's still going to do what Paul does. He wants to, put bloody spectacles on TV and people don't want that. Paul wants to go out in the media and start dissing the network. And people ain't going to like that either. Paul is making backdoor deals with the WWF. Nobody likes that. And then you had Ty Gordon, who was doing the same thing with WCW. Nobody likes that either. So if they had a financial backer who had a budget and a plan, they could have lasted a little bit longer until Paul ultimately self-destructed, because he was going to self-destruct. It's inevitable. Paul fucked up again. When he had the WWF's version of ECW, he had the financial backing. His creative was shit. He wanted to put all the belts on CM Punk and had CM Punk beat everybody in a cage match or some shit. It's like, no, Paul, you can't do that. No, that makes no sense. You can't do it. And, it's like, nah, man. So the money was just an excuse. He ended up blowing through the money because his ideas were, a little off the wall. You needed an editor and an accountant. You needed both. Let's see. If you can meet Vince McMahon in person, what is one thing you would ask him? Oh, see, that's a good question. I think one thing I probably would ask him is, is the business right now what he envisioned it would be in 1984 rather. Like when he decided to go all in on Hulkamania and the Rock and Wrestling and all that shit, did he see the WWE being what it is right now? If not, what did he think it was going to be? Or what was his 10 to 15 year plan? He probably wouldn't even remember it at this point. What was his plan when he originally did what he did? Because it was such a drastic departure from what his dad had been doing and what everybody else was doing. He came out and just said wrestling wasn't real. And he was still trying to kayfabe it a little bit. But he basically went into the media and was like, yeah, this shit ain't real. And people were kind of like, what? What are you doing? But it's New York shit. New York didn't believe in wrestling anyway. It had been exposed in New York a bunch of times already. That's why, when it came, look, Dusty had even come out and said it wasn't real at some point. So, and that wasn't the WWF. And that was actually before Vince did it. But when it happened in New York, or New Jersey rather, it was a bigger deal and they made national TV. People were like, oh shit's not real. It's like, well, New Yorkers have known it wasn't real for a long time because they constantly had people exposing the business. It's like people kept exposing the business in California. It was what it was. But That's my question. I would have asked him, is wrestling now what he thought it could be? You know, did he envision this? You know, massive multi-billionaire, billion-dollar company in the 80s. You know, did he see this kind of thing happening? You know, and I gotta ask him, like, how the hell did he even envision this? You know, because this had never existed before. There had never been a wrestling company with the merchandising and the marketing and the spread of WWF at even that point in time. There had never been one that had ever existed. So he was really, everything he does at this point is breaking new ground. You know, there is no promoter who has ever been in the position that Vince McMahon has been in. You know, there have been some who are broken new ground as far as going into pay-per-view and, you know, running big arenas and all that kind of stuff. But I'm talking, you know, having your own network. You know, now he's showing people own your own videotapes. Some of those promotions didn't even own their own videotapes. They would give the tapes to the channel or whatever. Some of them were even throwing the tapes in the garbage. And now everybody who starts their own record, you know, their own company, are trying to own their own tapes. Because Vince have shown you that you can monetize those old tapes. People were taping over their tapes. You know, he's shown people that there's a way to monetize that. You know, the action figures, the t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. There are people who are doing t-shirts, sure. There's people doing merchandise. But on the scale, the mass scale of the WWF, never. You know, never. Nobody had this. So I would definitely have to ask him about that. Whether he had envisioned, you know, he couldn't have seen video games and, you know, Netflix and all that kind of shit, you know. But did he have the idea of how big things could be back then? You know, that they would be able to penetrate almost every corner of media. There's comic books, there's video games, there's action figures, there's toys, they're making movies about this shit now. You know, it's like he couldn't. Some of that stuff is completely couldn't be shit that he could have seen coming. But the ability to adapt to pretty much every change in major media over the last case of 40 years have had some WWF stuff slapped on it. I really want to know, like, what gave him that idea that you had to jump on everything. You know, because WWF made a ton of money just off rentals, tape rentals, like the Blockbusters and shit like that. Because I know me and every child of the 80s and 90s lived in Blockbuster on like Fridays, and I was broke, and even I would get tapes. You know, so I know they was making a grip off them shits. That had to be a gold mine, if nothing else. You know, then the rentals. I had to ask him that question. All right. Is there any other questions? Nope. Mr. VXG, if you could make any talent trades between any of the wrestling promotions, what would they be? Well, that's a good question. If I could make any talent trade, I don't know who I would trade where. But because you have to consider the talent and then where they will be going and then what they would do there. You know, it's like, oh, it's easy for me to say, oh, I would put CM Punk in WWE. It's like, to do what? You know, do I want to see CM Punk versus Biggie? No. Do I want to see CM Punk versus Lashley? No. Do I want to see CM Punk versus Roman Reigns? Kind of. I don't think Roman would even do it, though. He doesn't like him. And then most of AEW's roster has already been in WWE and had a hell of a run. I think Britt Baker could do very well in WWE if she was given the chance and given the opportunity. But she's the only one. Everybody else is too raw. You know, MJF, he's a midget. You know, like, as soon as he get really mouthy with somebody, they'd probably put him in a locker somewhere, you know. But it would be nice verbally. I don't know if he would be able to have the matches, but I think the verbal skills, he definitely can last. But as far as moving guys around, you know, I would probably make a weird decision, like put Jake something in NXT. You know, like he has such untapped potential. The same thing with Powerhouse Hobbs. Same thing with Ricky Starks. You know, I'll probably just send those guys to NXT. They'll probably be the only trades. I'll trade you. Johnny Gargano's gone, so you can't trade him. But I'm sure there's somebody in NXT I don't like that I could trade for, Powerhouse Hobbs or Ricky Starks or somebody like that. It wouldn't be main event guys, because most of AEW's main event guys, which are the only guys we're talking about, have already been in WWE. And, Jericho, he's no threat to Roman. He's no, I don't want to see Jericho flop around in the ring with Bobby Lashley. I don't want to see that. Danielson just left WWE, and so did Adam Cole. So, no, I wouldn't make any of those trades. It'll probably be lower card guys. I think the MSK would do better in AEW than they would be in NXT. I think they just fit. They're another private party. They're another Martin Brothers, all that stuff. That's just what they do. I can't stand it. I wish they were gone. I wish they would have gone back to Impact. Or either that or need to learn how to fucking work. Sometimes it's good to have a high-paced, fast match amongst all the slower matches. That's the only good thing about MSK. But I could move them to AEW like that and not blink an eye and not give a shit. And they probably do very well there. No personality, no charisma. Likewise, I probably would pull a Trey Miguel and put him in NXT. I think he's the only one of the bunch that, was any good. He's actually an Impact, and he's stuck there. So I probably would move Starks, Hobbs, Trey Miguel, and Jake something to NXT. I'll move MSK to AEW. As far as Impact is concerned, they would probably get some of the women, maybe like an Io Shirai. I love Io Shirai. I'm not so sure how they would treat her on the main roster of WWE, but I know for sure she'd kill it in Impact. And I just know that she tear it up. Zoe Stark too. She tear it up in Impact. That's the good thing about Impact. They really put focus on the women's division, and so the women do very well there. But the main event guys, I don't know. I think WWE guys, that's where you start playing in sandboxes. I think AEW has the guys that they want, which are smaller, like heavyweight guys. I think WWE has the guys that they want with big, muscular guys. And I think Impact is disgusting when it comes to their main event scene. It is atrocious. It's not good. Darren Miles is back again. If you were in charge of WWE, would you reboot WCW Nitro in 2002 or 2003? No, the damage to the brand is already done. The damage to the brand was already done. Nobody expected high quality out of Nitro by that point, So no, I wouldn't have done it. They spent more years tearing down Nitro than they did building it up. Again, Nitro started in 95. The heyday of Nitro was in 98. They didn't go out of business until 2001. So that means from 95, 96, Nitro sucked. From 99 to 2001, Nitro sucked. So that's 3 years of good and 2.5 years of bad. No, I wouldn't have started tonight. And what was the point? That's not going to benefit you anyway by rebooting Nitro. Nah, I wouldn't have done that. Alto Johnson, what in your opinion has the worst world championship reign overall today been? Biggie or Hangman Page? Biggie, easily. Biggie was losing 9 title matches. He lost to Lashley after Lashley wrestled 3 guys or something like that earlier in the night. It was stupid. It was awful. Hangman Page is a dead fish. He's not going anywhere. But at least he got really good matches out of Bryan Danielson. And he didn't lose either one of them. He didn't win the first one, but he did win the second one. And so that gives him some momentum. Big E, from the way he even started to how it ended, was not used properly. It was awful. And Big E I'm actually more apt to like Big E than Hangman Page, because Hangman Page, he's a guy who's just kind of there. He's not like a huge charisma guy or anything like that. So I guess he added this in ticket sales, star power, ratings, demos, merchandise, crowd reactions, whatever. The crowd reaction for Hangman is always going to be better because everybody's more over in AEW. The crowd is just more energetic than it is in WWE. Star power, I'm pretty sure Big E's a bigger star than Hangman Page. I'm pretty sure There's guys who aren't never been WWE champion as a more bigger star than Hangman Page. I'm pretty sure if you did Google Trends, you'll probably see Hangman Pages behind people who haven't wrestled in 10 years or some shit like that. Ratings, I don't know. I'm not sure. That would depend on the booking. And they were booking Hangman with Danielson. They was booking Big E to wrestle Kevin Owens in the third hour of Raw, which is at 10 from 10 to 11. So the ratings are definitely going to be different. Even though I believe the 10 to 11 Raw still outdraws all of Dynamite. But, it is what it is. I probably wouldn't have come up with that on my own. Jesus Leva. Name your top 5 wrestlers in history. Mine are Ultimate Warrior, Eddie Guerrero, Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Triple H, or Shawn Michaels. So mine are Macho Man Randy Savage, Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, and what would be the fifth? The fifth would be did I say Macho Man already? Let's see. I said Macho Man, Flair. Probably be Flair. So it'd be Macho Man, Bret, Undertaker, Shawn, and Flair. Raw. Why did you decide to use Ripper 5'9" for most of your intros and outros? All right, so Eric July, Young Ripper 5'9", he's an anarcho capitalist. So that means he doesn't believe in copyright. And so when he did the album, he basically said, do whatever you want with it. If you want to, use it for intros and outros, you have my full permission. You're not going to get copyrighted. And I was like, why not? It was a good place to start to doing intros. When I actually listened to the album, though, I actually thought it was pretty good. And I was like, wow, this is easier to make songs out of than I thought. And that's pretty much how it ended up happening. I just knew I wasn't going to get hit with copyright for using it. And there's old videos that I have that had been ripped apart by copyright, and that's probably why my channel took so long to grow. Because I was getting delisted a lot. So somebody says, WG Phil, he has 2 questions. Your top 5 favorite wrestlers' attire. Oh, okay. So top 5 attires. See, a Bret's Survivor Series 1996 attire. Great shit. The attire he wore against Stone Cold Steve Austin. That attire was dope. I really liked always liked Bret's the ones that looked like he had paint on them. I forget which where he wore those, but I always liked those too. I liked Shawn's the blue with the hearts. Which event did he wear those at? I want to say In Your House. I think it might have been SummerSlam 95. He wore those against Razor Ramon. Big fan of those too. Let's see. What else? The purple gloves Undertaker. Really big fan of that too. Because purple is such a weird color that, why would Undertaker wear purple? It's a very odd color choice, but it worked. Nobody thought it was weird. And if it was red or something, it'd probably stood out too much. If it was blue, it'd be too much. But it was purple. And people were just kind of like, oh, he's wearing purple gloves. That's cool. He had the purple boot covers and the purple lining on his hat. It was dope. That's going to be my favorite Undertaker look. American Badass is pretty cool too. So that would probably be 3 or 4 of them. Right off the top of my head, I can think of. WG Phil, what's your favorite pay-per-view arena? I like the Hammerstein Ballroom. Even though it's a toilet, it has I like arenas that are more intimate. Like the gigantic stadiums is all cool and shit for the drones to go around and everything. But you don't really get the fan interaction like you do in a smaller arena. So now I'm not saying to get these bars and these, National Guard armories and all this kind of shit. But I'm always partial to the fans being close to the ring. And the wrestlers having to go through the fans, slap hands or whatever as they go to the ring. That's something that I miss now. And I always appreciate it when wrestlers do that. They go to the crowd and start slapping hands and everything. Because in the past, when you look at like the Von Erichs or whatever, they had to come through the crowd and the crowd be reaching and grabbing them and patting them on the back. And, women are grabbing, kissing them all on the face and everything. It just makes them feel like they're bigger stars. When the crowd is so far away from them, they're so detached from the wrestler that it kind of takes a lot out of the show. So I like them when they're more intimate and they're more closely together. So I like the Hammerstein Ballroom. It's a very, ECW run that event a lot. I know GCW is going to be running it soon. I may actually watch that show. So depends on how this, if I go to the GCW show and I like it. We have this intimate setting where the crowd is not too far away, and you can hear everything that they're doing in there. So the crowd energy is bouncing off the walls and it's really intense on the ring and everything. That's really cool. I also like big arenas because I like the Sky Dome in Toronto. I thought the Toronto Sky Dome is badass. It's great. SummerSlam 92. What stadium is that again? I don't remember. But that stadium was great too. So those are probably like my 3. But I love the Hammerstein Ballroom. All right, we get into the last 4 questions. Oh, Mr. VXG, can you explain Danhausen to me? He gets a lot of online hype, but I just don't get it. Is he a legit wrestler or is he mostly shtick like Orange Cassidy? He is mostly shtick. Danhausen, even in Ring of Honor, he portrayed very little wrestling acumen. He's a decent wrestler, but he's mostly a comedy guy. He's 99% character. And that's really what everybody likes, is that Danhausen's commitment to his character it extends to the point of Twitter and everything too, where he changes he has his own language essentially. He has a thing about teeth, but he is mostly a gimmick. CJ Perry, do you think they will job out Bobby Lashley to Brock Lesnar? Yes, yes I do. There's no doubt about it. Bob ain't winning that match. I don't see it. Bennett X100, what's your favorite comic book movie? Oh, Batman Begins with the Catwoman and the Penguin. I love Batman Begins. I love the first Batman too with Jack Nicholson. Also very good. I also love Spider-Man 2. I thought that was excellent. Spider-Man 1 is good too with Tobey Maguire. It's okay. I like Spider-Man 2 a lot more though. I think it told a better story. Captain America, the Winter Soldier. One of my favorite ones too. But I think my favorite overall is probably Batman. Batman Begins is the first thing that came to my mind, but now that I think about it, Jack Nicholson as the Joker, can't beat that. Who do you see beating Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship, and who you think beating Brock for the WWE Championship? I think I already answered the question for Roman already. It's got to be Drew McIntyre. And if Brock is going to lose the belt, it's got to be the Big E. You got to make Big E whole, I don't see why they wouldn't put the belt back on Big E. The only thing I can see them doing is maybe mixing the titles together. That would be stupid, though. What was your dream career growing up? Ooh, that's a very good question. My dream career. As a kid, I wanted to be like Barry Sanders. I wanted to play football. But then I had a lot of medical shit, and then my dad didn't want me to play football either. I had really bad asthma as a kid. So I would faint during practice and shit. And so my dad pulled me from the team. So I tried playing PAL. That didn't work. Then I tried playing high school. I ended up fainting during practice and there too. So I pushed myself to the point of exhaustion a couple of times playing football. I never actually made it. All right, so Music Fanatic, $34.99 with the last list of questions. Do you think AEW has peaked in popularity after bringing in Punk and Danielson? I think it's very hard for them to go further than they are right now. I don't see how they can go further than what they are right now. They would need somebody that they have already earmarked to be a top guy. They need them to have a hit. They need, it only takes 1 or 2 guys to really get over and be mainstream in order for the popularity to increase. I don't see AEW doing that right now, though. If somebody like, say, Ricky Starks or somebody like Jungle Boy really crosses over into the mainstream, then their popularity can be more than it is now. But right now, I think they have peaked. If it's only been 3 years, give them another 2, give them another 2.5. We'll see how the TBS run lasts. The TBS run scored 1 million viewers on the first night. That's a good start. I expect it to go down. I just do. So we'll see where it settles, and we have to sit back and wait for some of the young guys to really kick in and see what they can do. I don't want to say that AEW is dead or is most popular is it going to be in 3 years. It's just not fair. It's not enough time. When will Tony Khan and everyone else in AEW learn to get off Twitter or get social media training? When something happens and that really rocks the company. Like this diversity thing was probably the worst tweet Tony Khan has ever put out there. And the backlash that he got from it should have taught him a lesson to get the fuck off Twitter. But it's going to take for somebody to do something exceptionally bad that makes the media for them to learn. Because AEW doesn't seem to have much control over their performers. And it's going to be somebody going to do something that people are not going to be able to laugh off. And it's going to become mainstream. And people are going to be like, AEW is fucking up. What are then they will get it together and start getting. But Tony Khan's been a dipshit on Twitter for a long time. I remember when he used to get at football players on Twitter. So he's an idiot. Are you going to cover anything New Japan Pro Wrestling this year, like the joint show with Noah after Wrestle Kingdom? Well, this is crazy because I just did Wrestle Kingdom. So yes, I did Wrestle Kingdom. Will I be doing the Noah joint show? Probably not. I don't know enough of the Noah guys, and I don't think I can add anything to that conversation. I just don't know those guys. His final question: do you think Tony Khan or someone else ever puts on a super show with other promotions like New Japan, AAA, CMLL, Noah, All Japan, NWA, Impact, GCW, etc.? Something like the WWF, All Japan, New Japan Wrestling Summit. I honestly think it'll happen within the next few years. I believe so too. I think that if AEW gets desperate enough, they will start calling to do super shows. And I think other people will be willing to do it. The only issue is who's going to be the big spoon, who's going to be the little spoon. Right now, any super show that AEW does, they're going to be the big spoon, which means that they're going to be calling the shots. That guys are going to be going over, and other people might not want to deal with that. Yeah, I think that a super show will eventually end up happening. I think that at this point, a lot of these companies are getting into bed with each other, and they're getting so cozy that it will eventually end up with a super show. It may even end up just being another Ring of Honor New Japan show, with probably some CMLL guys mixed in. CMLL is pretty much a dead promotion too, though. AAA is always looking to get their toes in American audiences. I could see them doing something. And I think it would be smart for people to do a AAA or CMLL branded show in the South, especially somewhere like Miami or Texas, where you can really cash in on that Hispanic audience. I don't see why people haven't done it yet. It seems like it would be very smart for them to do so, especially if GCW is going to start going south or something like that. Right now they're staying in like cold weather areas, but if they was to like go to like Houston or something, or to go to Miami, GCW definitely should call AAA or somebody like that and bring some guys in and do a super show. But AEW, I can see it happening because Tony Khan is going to eventually get pushed to do it, either by the performers themselves or by his fans. And I think once AEW starts to cool off quite a bit, he'll pull the trigger and he'll call in, and all the super friends will form together to have one super show with probably Impact and GCW and AAA and all the promotions that he already works with. All right. So thank you guys for listening. This was fun. See you guys again in February with a Q&A. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace.